Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is a quarter-page version of my last scene that I did, which was a full-page version, 8.5 by 11 scene, using those very simplistic composition. Maybe it doesn't look like it, but it really is. But I did it in your standard card format, quarter-size page. 4¼ by 5.5, but I used the same stamps that I did in the other scene. Okay, maybe not everything. I used my water pattern small stamp, but these images are from Nature Set number 8. They're also available individually as well, but I wanted to use those stamps in a quarter-page card. The card, I don't know, it seemed like people like that scene, but there aren't many instances where people are going to do 8.5 by 11s. I hardly do them, but I work on quarter-size pieces all the time, so this is that scene, or that technique, the color scheme, everything done on a smaller format, okay? I'm not sure which one I liked better. I think I might even like the smaller one, just in terms of how the colors worked out. Everything comes out a little bit differently. I did this one, and I did this one, and they look different in terms of the vibrancy of that, you know, like green down here and everything like that, doesn't it? But I used Memento inks on this one too, because I know people don't have, or a lot of people don't have Marvys anymore, and I used some of this cosmetic sponge because not everyone has stylus tools, but I don't know, I used both, okay? So anyways, oh, and that green actually ended up being the peeled paint instead of like the Marvy turquoise that I used, but it worked out pretty good. But anyways, this is a stamp along video. If you choose to stamp along with me, feel free to pause anytime, of course, and if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. But I cover all of the really main points of, well, I do this in every video, but I really kind of emphasize all of the basics in terms of the dye-based ink glossy cardstock application. Maybe I'll do this scene again in a stamp along using matte paper and this technique next. I think it's a good idea to do that, you know, just to show people some different media uses, you know, based on what they might have in their stamping room. Let's say if we don't have glossy cardstock. But I think I'll do something like that next in the upcoming days. But anyways, a fun little scene, and in this one I'll also cover things like the what to do and what not to do with gel pens and your white pigment ink applications. Everyone likes this look right here, but everyone kind of runs into kind of this blobby type of thing, and I'll show you exactly what not to do and what you can do if you get something that you don't like from what you shouldn't have done. So I'll cover it all, and you'll see how exactly, you know, how forgiving this medium or this technique really is, because that's what this technique is really all about. But it's about having a real super complex looking end result, but I think you'll find out in the process it really isn't. You know, so very forgiving. What you'll need is your Nature Set number 8 or these individual stamps. If you have the smaller versions of any of these, you can use those ones as well. And mix and match your pads. I used Mementos on this one. If you have Distress Inks, I don't have Memento Summer Sky, but I have a Distress Ink tumbled glass or something like that, a light blue. Mix and match, okay? But these are all dye-based inks, okay? We're not mixing and matching like a pigment ink with our dye-based inks or something like that. If I don't have, you know, a certain colored blue, but I have a Marvy pen, you know, this one's green, but if I had a blue version, mix and match that. You can do that. So use whatever you have. You know, a lot of you have all kinds of different pads and pens from different ranges and lines. Go ahead and mix and match, but kind of line them up. And what you'll do is you'll go first, have some kind of light blue, medium blue, and a darker blue. If you have 3 darker blues, then, I don't know, play around with them, or 3 light blues and use them, you know. And if you start applying them, and if you apply the next one, you can't see it, that means that you don't need to use that next color of ink. So mix and match, have some kind of a sponge applicator, okay? Quarter page card. If you don't have something like this kind of sponge applicator, try something like a cosmetic sponge or something like that sort. Very inexpensive, you know, very readily available. And on this case, a glossy cardstock, okay? All right, so repeating myself a lot today, but anyways, I'm not a morning stamper. All right, so if you have the time and you feel so inclined, kind of stamp along with me and let's have some fun on the, I don't have a title for that, something Lakeside Twilight or something like that, okay? Okay, let's start a quick, relatively quick stamp along video here based on the 8.5 by 11 scene that I did recently that's been kind of well received. I don't work this large very often, but I like to once in a while just to give myself a little bit of extra space and to, I don't know, kind of play around with some different aspects of scene making that are kind of afforded in such a large area, relatively large area by paper arts, card making standards go. All right, now I'm going to do this based on the nature set number 8 imagery. A lot of these images, you know, are used or were used in this scene right here. This one down here in the foreground, background, Lakeside Cove type of thing, and the oak branch hanging from above, okay? And we'll just do that in a smaller format, and a lot of times people ask me, can you use large stamps like this on a smaller card? Because the, you know, everyone's used to having to use, like, fitting the entire scene on a card, or stamp image on a card, because it just makes sense. You have a birthday cake, you're not going to have a quarter of it sticking in your page, but in scenic stamping, it is perfectly, I don't know, the genre is perfectly suited for using partial imagery. Okay? All right, now we're going to use a quarter page piece of glossy cardstock. Okay? If you have matte cardstock, you can use that as well. Some different aspects of the process are going to feel a little bit different. Now I'm going to use my Memento inks. Marvy inks have been discontinued, okay? But now here's one of the things that I'm going to say. Okay, now in this large scene, what I did was I used a re-inker fluid to get my base coat down, okay? Now what makes this process really easy, okay, in terms of the blending of colors is if you have enough of this base coat down. So this is Memento ink right here, and it's fairly thick, okay? Now this is glossy cardstock, not photo paper, so when I add this down, it's really going to give me a lot of time to spread this ink around. But what you want to do is you want to get a good amount of ink down, okay? So now as you start to apply some ink right here, what I want you to do is kind of follow along with me in terms of your application process. You notice I'm still kind of working in one kind of quarter area or zone of my paper, okay? Get a good supply of ink down like that. And I actually might squeeze some out like that. I'll tap some out to leave a little bit of a puddle, okay? Like that. And then I'll spread it out. Okay, now you notice I'm kind of working in one direction. And see, that's how I get this nice transition. I'm not trying to do the whole card all evenly at one time. I'm working zones or just one area, okay? Now watch this. I'm going to leave some of this area light in the middle like that, okay? And that's how we get our lighting in here. A lot of times people think it's some kind of additive process, like, well, how did you get the light in there? And you kind of explain to them, well, you just don't ink there. And that's kind of a strange concept because it looks like an additive process, or that's what the way they're thinking, okay? So no, by doing light, all you're doing is just you're leaving some areas of the paper, okay? Now see here, I've gone and given this area, this zone, some color, but you'll notice it's not as dark as this. But this is the thing that happens when people get coverage like that, you know, when they're doing this kind of dye-based, glazed process. A lot of times people feel that after they get that kind of coverage, they just kind of move on because they think, okay, I've colored all that area and there's a complete coverage there. All right, but here's the thing: you want coverage, but you want saturation, and that's what gives your scenes a nice kind of deep, layered vibrancy to them. Okay, so let's just keep going on. All right, and add more. Okay, if it can get darker using your existing ink, then use more of it, okay, before you move on to your next color. Now when it just won't seem to get any darker, that's when you know you've kind of reached your full kind of saturation using that given ink that you're working on. It's really important with the first color that you get full coverage, because not only are you getting full coverage, but you're also kind of you're kind of coating the surface here by saturating the pulp of the paper a little bit. Okay, this moisture from this ink is kind of getting soaked into the surface, and it's moistening kind of the pulp of the paper a little bit. And what that does is, by kind of having a kind of a wetter surface and pulp, when you apply your darker tones to come, they will spread nice and easy because they're not being kind of grabbed off of your applicator so fast. All right, now if you don't have one of these stylus tools like this, this is a really convenient tool here because it's very comfortable. I also use these little sponges like this, these cosmetic sponges. There's a little bit of green on here still, but from that last scene. I did this like a few days ago, but you can see it's still moist. But you can just kind of apply it on like this. All right. This seems like it's a little crumbly. These are really old. But anyways, you can see kind of that same process, but use the same kind of movement, okay? Keep your hand positioning nice and ergonomic, okay? This is the way your hands go, and you're going like this, okay? Not going like this, where your wrists or something like that are bent, okay? Keep it nice and comfortable. All right, let's finish this off right here. Kind of working my other zone right here. Okay. Try to make this go along a little bit faster. Now remember, in these stamp along videos, just feel free to pause them. Make use of that pause button if I start going ahead a little bit too fast. You can see how thick these Memento inks are because I'm kind of wiping from right here, right? But when I kind of come up like this, all right, it's leaving that little kind of ring right there. It's like pushing that ink. It's not any big deal, okay? Now you don't have to get this, things do not have to be perfectly blended like this in this process right here, especially if you're, if you're doing this for the first time. People can get this. Like we taught this, I taught classes in this type of thing for years. We did make and takes for thousands and thousands of people, and everyone got it just down, just fine. But, if you're working at home, I don't know what kind of paper you're using, what kind of inks, but they all kind of have a different feel to them, in terms of how they react to the paper, how fast your paper's absorbing things, how fast your inks are drying. If you live out in Arizona, chances are, this ink, due to the relative humidity, it's going to feel like it's drying much faster. So you have to use a little bit more, okay? Now, if you have something like a re-inker fluid in your lightest color, those things are going to make it so much faster for you to do this process because you're going to have so much ink on here, it just slathers down. But here's the thing, though. If you have a re-inker fluid and you're doing that, try to watch that you're not inking up everything on the paper, okay? That is your light right there, okay? And it's going to look different every time. I can have 20 people doing this and following along with me in a workshop situation, and this part, just using the first color ink, everyone's cards look completely different, because of the all of the variation that can happen. All right, this is Bahama Blue. It's a medium tone blue. It's kind of real similar to the light blue from Marvy. Okay. All right, now here's the thing. We're going to start applying this. It feels different now because this page is very saturated, so it's very comfortable. Look at that. I can just spread that out. It blends beautifully. So take enough time with your first color of ink, and it will make your scene here and coloring process so much easier, and kind of the transition's more graceful by having that page a little bit more moist. So you can imagine when I get to my next color, it's going to be even wetter, more damp, you know, in terms of the surface right here. And look how fast this goes now, okay? The more time you spend on that first color, the less time you have to spend with all the other colors after it, okay? My thing is just trying to get people to use that. Enough of that first color. You know, when you're coming from many other forms of stamping where we're coloring outline designs or something like that, you might be kind of coloring within the lines, okay? And then after you get it completely colored, that's it. You know, it is ready to go. But this is a different process right here that you have to kind of tweak a little bit, in that you're going for saturation. You know, you're kind of trying to soak that paper underneath that image. Now in this case, we're just doing the background first, okay? All right, here's blue. See, this is coverage right here, right? I have taken this and I've swiped it all the way across there, but watch this right here. I can kind of add this in, and it gets a little bit darker like that, okay? All right, now retain your lighter areas in there, okay? Which means that when you get to your darker inks, don't go in there quite as far. You know, you can kind of go in there if you've tapped this out like this and you've taken it in a little bit like that, okay? Because it's kind of lighter now, right, and drier. But for the most part, when you get into your darker tones, kind of leave them a little bit more perimeter oriented, okay? We're kind of going for this kind of vignette type of effect here in terms of the framing of our scene, okay? You see that gets a little bit darker. I have a lot of ink right there, but here's the thing now that you're going to feel. You're going to start applying, and it's not going to be very dark. Watch this right here. This is that color just on a matte piece of paper, but look how much darker it is in that, and that's because this area right here is achieved almost super saturation. It just won't take any more ink. So what you have to do is you have to change your technique from wiping it in like that to kind of building up like this, just like you're applying ink to your stamps, okay? You just want to build up these little micro beads of ink on there like that, and you can see it gets darker like that, okay? See the difference between that side and this side? So just change your technique a little bit. It doesn't take a lot of time, but see, I'm just kind of doing it on the edge there. I'm not taking this and going for a shape right in the middle of there, okay? Like that. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of taking it. Here, I'll do it right here so you can see. It's like a Pac-Man right there. I'm just kind of doing it on a little bit of a corner like that. And see how that edge? Now you get this variation coming. It looks like it's glowing from within your scene. It gets a little bit darker, and it's darker on the edges. Simple, okay? The darker colors can often be a precarious thing, though, because, now watch this when I get to the black, all right? And my next color, just to make it a little bit darker. Okay, now here's the thing now. This is where it happens in a lot of different classes. Now I'm going to use a Marvy black. Use whatever black you have. All right. I don't have a Memento black. Marvy's been my main thing, but use whatever one you want. Okay, here's what you want to avoid. Now, a lot of times in workshops or making takes, this looks great, right? But now when people get to the darkest color, they have kind of the toughest time with that because the darkest color is going to leave the strongest impression, okay? And what you want to avoid are these types of marks like this, like especially like if I'm pressing it down like that, getting that shape in there, okay? So what you're going to do is just going to use that same kind of motion that I did before, or process, and just go on a tiny little corner like this. Hold on a second. Okay, back here. And doing a little bit of a corner like that. And this is not a hard process, okay, to get that little kind of halo like that. But what happens is people get this, and it's because they go on like this, and there's kind of going really hard. But watch this. There's nothing hard about this right here, if you take it in this process right here. So don't try to rush it, though, because it just makes it so much easier. But look at this. If you start off on that little tiny corner like that, okay, and then what you're doing is I'm not thinking about my next corner, I'm just thinking about this one spot. It's kind of like the zen of color application. Just kind of work on what you're working on, and just think about it in terms of building something up nice and incrementally. Kind of build it up, see, and as I kind of add more of it, I'm not showing shape in terms of the shape of the stylus tool, okay, or the edges. I'm just getting tone like that, okay? So, if you're kind of doing this for the first time, I don't know, start off with 1/8 of an inch or something like that. And just work on it slowly, bring it in. Now see, I'm kind of moving this. I'm not just staying in one spot like this and then getting a really hard edge like that, okay? I'm kind of taking this and I'm moving it in a little bit as I do it, tapping it around, going a little bit back and forth. Keep your movements kind of small, okay? Now if you're working with like a Memento inks, those inks are a lot thicker, and you can kind of wipe it in if you want to, you know? But again, now remember, what you want to do is you want to avoid going into that lighter area. A lot of times what people do is, in this process right here, is when they move into their darker tones, they go into this area too far, and then they've eradicated all of the lighter areas in there, okay? And if they do that, what you could do is, let's say I've gotten rid of all that white in there, because I've toned it all in. What you could do is you can just use more of the black on the outer perimeter, and by contrast, that area in the middle will seem light by comparison, right? Because you're using a much darker tone. So you can also use value, you know, just darker values to define that light. Right now I'm using white to define that light in there, but if you've covered that up and you used all summer sky in there or something, or your lightest blue, whatever one you're working with, okay, just define those lighter areas with some darker tones, okay? So you might have to use more of the Danube Blue, you know, in here, or more of the black, okay? It's not wrong, it just gives it a different mood. It says that there's not as much reflective light in there. Maybe it's a different time of day, or, you know, something like that. Night, twilight, whatever. Okay, that is good. Like that. Oh, I almost forgot about that greenish tinge, okay? Now, you know, this one's not a great one because it's kind of I don't know, it's like almost like an olivey-ish type of color, but I know a lot of you have things like distress inks, but, you know, pick out some kind of light green. Don't pick out like a Christmas green or something like that to do this with. All right, now I have a little bit of extra color in here, but I'm looking for my pack of these. I'm not even sure where I put them. All right, I'm just going to use this one here, okay? It has a little bit of other, you know, my other green on it. I think the turquoise Marvy one or something like that. Let's just go right here into the distress. Okay, now I'm going to tint this. Ooh, that is really green. Okay, like I said, not my ideal choice. Let me kind of blot it off just to show you that you can use what you have. Now I'm not using such a dark green, but let's just kind of pull this in like so. Okay, to give it kind of a warmer tinge here and there. Okay, let me see. I think this sponge tip is starting to disintegrate here, so I'm getting some crumbs here. But it should work just fine. Okay. I'm very big on making use of what you have if it's possible. Okay. And this is a technique that I'm doing that is not brand specific. There are companies that have come and gone, you know, lines that have come and gone of inks and applicators since I've been doing this, you know, 25 years or so, in terms of this glazed dye-based process right here. So I've used all kinds of stamps, pads throughout the years, all kinds of colors. We started doing this even before raised dye-based pads, you know, were even invented. There were companies that supplied things for the crafting industry that were raised because how to, I'm just wiping off these little crumbs of this paper right here. Companies couldn't figure out how to have a raised dye-based pad, you know, without, you know, the ink coming out of it. So what they did was they came up with some kind of formula, you know, to thicken their inks and then match that up with the pad to hold that ink. And if it was, you know, the right combination, then it wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't get a pad like this with all the ink leaked out of it. Before it was recessed, you know, the pad was within this like bowl type of situation on a fabric pad. All right, we are done with that. That looks pretty good, actually. That brighter green looks kind of nice in there. It's different than this, though, isn't it? You know, I did this and I did this, and it looks different because of the different inks that I've used and how much I've used of a certain ink in a given area. I kind of like that brighter blue in there. So these are, except for the black, you know, completely different inks than what I've done before. You know, done previously on this scene. And it looks just fine, okay? But even if, here's the thing, you know, when you do this type of stamping right here, it doesn't really matter if there's kind of, if you have some textures like that in there that, you know, aren't maybe the most ideal in terms of the blending process. When you stamp your stamps over it, it really doesn't even matter. Everything comes together. And that's what everyone in my workshops all kind of realized after they stamped their scenes out. It was like, no matter what they did, you know, once they kind of stamp over it and get the imagery down, it pushes everything that you've done in the background, which this represents, way in the back, you know. And suddenly it's, I don't know, things aren't quite as obvious. So, I don't know, scenic stamping in many, many ways, different aspects, is the most forgiving, easiest form of stamping. The thing is that when people look at an end result, they think it's hard because it isn't quite so obvious. There aren't outline designs, you know, of something here and an image here and an image here where you can tell, oh, those are the 3 images that were used and this is how they stamped it out, and it doesn't matter which one came first. Okay, but now here, I'm stamping this. Now I'm working on a smaller format, of course, than this one. So I still want, you know, sky and land, surface down here. And I'm going to put some things in the foreground right here. So I don't want to stamp this too low because I won't have room for my foreground, okay? And I don't want to stamp it too high where I won't have, you know, space for that little hanging branch. So I'll stamp it kind of about 2/3. I mean, you can go midway or something like that. It won't matter. Okay, now here's the thing. We're stamping kind of in a somewhat of a damp surface, right? I mean, it's not damp, it's not leaving a bunch of ink on my fingers, but it is a little bit damp. So what you want to do is you want to allow this stamp ink to transfer and impress on the surface right here. So if you're stamping wet into wet, if you pull this off too fast, it's going to act like a vacuum and you're going to get a very light impression of this. So here's what I'll do. Okay, I'm going to just let that sit here. You don't have to let it sit there for 10 minutes or anything like that, but let's just start inking up our next stamp. Now, I won't be using this entire stamp right here because it's not going to fit down here, okay? But ink up more than you think you'll need. I'm just going to ink up the whole thing, okay? That's better than saying, okay, I'm only going to use this portion of this stamp. So I just ink up that portion, and then I stamp it down there, and oh, there's a big space below it because I didn't ink it up far enough. You know what I mean? It's not going to cost that much more to ink up that bottom portion like that. So, even if you don't use it, what I'm saying. All right, let's take this one off. There we go with our impression. Okay. If you want to make a really super quick version of this, all you do is you can take your brayer, if anyone's done brayering before, add those types of colors to it and just brayer over that whole thing and get that swatched background going instantly. All right, this one right here, I'm going to go on the left and right hand side, okay? I'll re-ink in between impressions, but all right, let's go down here. If I stamped it higher or lower, it doesn't matter, okay? Every scene's going to come out a little bit different. Don't be afraid to overlap your other parts, okay? Now, re-ink in between impressions, okay? Don't go for a second impression of this, not for your foreground. You want it nice and dark. Okay, let's go about like so. I'll go a little bit higher with this one, maybe. Now, here's what I like to do. See, like even on this one right here, I kind of leave a little bit of a space right here for the viewer's eye to enter the scene. That's my little thing. I have this kind of like it's like a fence. Think about it in terms of like a fence here with an open area. It's kind of welcoming. If you want to make it look like, if there's some kind of thing in there and you're kind of this person hiding, then you can put something here in the foreground, like a little peekaboo, like you're looking at that character or something like that down there. Okay, here we go like that. So I can go for another one. Maybe I'll just use this little tree here. Now, if I'm going to just use like one tree, I'm not going to bother inking up the entire stamp, down here. But let's just go for another one right here. Okay, how does that look? Now, one of the things I did in this scene right here is I used the pine rose stamp in the background in a lighter color. I'm not going to do this one because I'm going to keep it to the images that are in Nature Sheet 8. Okay, now if I wanted to, I could mask that off and I could stamp. Let's just do that. Sometimes I talk about these theoreticals. Let's just do that in application here. We're almost done with this one right here, as far as the stamp one goes. But let me show you. Let's add in, the figuratively speaking, the kitchen sink in here, okay? And you'll see what the kitchen sink entails in terms of some very easy. That was my cleaning right here because I don't have a wet sponge. So, all right. Or a wet paper towel. Let's just mask off that portion. Don't mask off any of those trees, but here, let's go back to the Danube Blue, I think. Okay, and I'm inking up some of these trees from here, right? It's the beauty of scenic stamping, you can use certain portions of the stamps for what you want. Okay, let me blot off some of this a little bit. Let's go for a little bit of a lighter version. I'm blotting off some of this. I'm kind of drying the bottom of those trees, and those trees up top are a little bit more moist, and I'll show you why I did that. This is those little tweaks, that can make a nice difference. Okay, see that tree in the background? So there's a little bit of distance now, right? And you're just using the imagery on your existing stamp. So, you know, what other, you know, type of genre can you really do that with? All right, blotting that off down here, okay. Oh, by the way, so I'm kind of blotting this off a little bit so it transitions from a little bit more wet to dry. So that's when, so when it transitions down here, the nice silhouette of those foreground trees still shows up. Okay, so I don't have something dark right behind something dark. Okay, get it? So, and what are we doing? We're just using the same colors that we did in our kind of background swatch color swatch creation. See how nice that looks right there? And it gives it a lot of depth, right? All right, let's do a couple more impressions. Let's see, I'll show you where I'm going to do that. That light tree will not show up in that dark area. So let's go for a full saturated impression using that same tree right here, okay? Now I'm just blotting, masking off these rocks down here because I don't want that tree in those rocks. Okay, that looks pretty good there. It gives it a little bit of extra depth. And what does that do? It kind of creates mood in the scene, doesn't it? Mood is created in scenic stamping when you kind of have this situation where you're making the viewer aware of the space in between the objects. So when you have lighter background objects, it's the quickest and easiest way to kind of make an emotional statement because you're saying that there's moisture in the air between the trees in the background and, you know, the foreground trees, like here and here, okay? Because what you have is light illuminating, in this case probably mist and moisture in the air, fog, whatnot, okay? So, in other words, just stamp out your background stuff lighter than things somewhere nearer to you. It doesn't have to be the foreground like this. This is really mid-ground or something like that, but just create lighter impressions in the back and you're good to go. Okay, let's see here. Let's stay with our black impressions. Let's go with this right here. This is a big stamp right here, right? So can this work in this space right up here in this one little half-inch area to 1 inch? The oak branch stamp I've created, you know, it's a little bit heavier here and airier here. Can you see that? So that you can just use certain portions for what you want. If you want it a little bit more airy, then use the back of it. You want it a little bit more dense, then use this portion, or use some combination of it. Okay, let's go down like this. Did I ink up enough of it? All right, hanging in. I don't want to go down, you know, 4 inches into the scene and just cover up everything that I just stamped out. So, you know, I'm using it within reason. All right, where do you place this? There's no specific place where you have to kind of put it, right? You see that now? So we've kind of put something, a situation where we have something kind of close to us. And as a viewer, I like to do foreground things that are fairly large, like grass or something like that, because it really pushes the depth of field in the scene by having something near. Now see, there's that branch. I just did another little impression of it out here to kind of balance off that texture up there and shape. But we've put ourselves standing underneath a tree looking out into the scene, okay? Oh, here's another thing that we can do here. All right, now here's a water stamp, okay? It's water texture. Now we could stamp this out in black, okay? It would be a little bit more dramatic if we did that than if we did it in lighter tones. But here's what we're going to do. Here's my trick to this, and I have a specific videos just for this type of thing here, just water, but let's do it apply it to this scene right here. There's our three colors right there that we went through, okay? Light, medium, and dark, okay? In this scene right here, we have light, medium, and darker edges, right? Let's use this texture stamp, and let's say that the shadows of these ripples in the lighter area are going to be lighter than the shadows in the darker areas. Does that make sense? All right, so let's take this. Let me blot it off first. I think I had dark blue or black on it from that scene, so it's a good thing I tested that out. I'm going to do it again here. I think I have some black on this. Okay. Not the most ideal way to clean stamps, but I'm not really anal about that at all, you know, as you can see. Okay, let's just start it in lighter areas. Okay, now I'm coming up into my darker areas like that. Or my lighter areas, I should say. But see, there it is, right? Okay. But now you can't see it in this area, right? Well, just make use of your value scale or whatnot, whatever you want to call it. Now, here's the darker, the Bahama Blue, the medium tone blue, okay? Alright, I'll start it in the darker area. Work it around here. Don't go in the middle area because that's where your lighter one was, okay? Here's that. I might come into it a little bit, you know, with the second impression, so you can kind of see that building up a little bit, right? See that in there? But now in here you can't see it, so let's go to the Danube Blue. Where are we going to put that? We're going to put it in the darker areas, okay? So just stay away from that area, just like we did with the darker tone of inks, okay? It's more perimeter oriented, so come into it like so. Okay, there you have that. So see, there's that transitioning, ripply shadow type of thing going on. Give another one right there. All right. Easy enough. All right, now we have this. I mean, it looks pretty good on its own, but let's do something here. Let's go back to our color scheme. Don't worry, we're not going to do these two. Let's just go with this darker blue one right here, okay? Now I have a little bit of, well, a lot of black on this. This is the same tip, but just to show you, you know, it's not all this precarious type of exercise. I'm just going to go back to my dark blue here. If you want to tap off some of that ink, you can, okay? It had black on it, but I'm going to take this. Now, what I like to do, now this is shading. This is how you shade in scenes. I'm not going for a super dark impression of this, but see where the shadows are on this image? All you have to do is just follow what's on the imagery and add a little bit of extra shadowing, okay? So let's start off with this darker blue. And see, I'm not going for that shape right there. I have this tip and I have it on its edge. If you're using a, you know, a sponge tip like this, you can kind of do the same thing. See this right here? I have it on its edge, okay? And I'm doing it very lightly, okay? Just tap very lightly. Now see, what I do is I change the angle of this. This is not comfortable for me. I can't see behind there. So what I do is I turn it like this, and I can see right in there. You know, I'm sitting right here, so I keep things nice and ergonomic. And I'll just do this on this one little area, and you'll see what a big difference it can make. Okay, I'm kind of doing it from here down. I'm putting a little bit on that rock, but not on the top of the rock, because the top of the rock is lighter, right? So just stay away from that. So see, don't rush it, you know. That's what makes things super easy to do. When people rush it or try to hurry through something, that's when they get this type of thing and they say, oh my gosh, I got that shape right there. How do I remove it from that? You know, and I think, well, you can blend it in, but it makes it so much faster when you don't get that to begin with, okay? So you can see that little shadow right there, and see how it anchors that area in there. The image looks like it's kind of integrated in with the background. See how light it is right there? Let's just take some of that ink and add it to that shadow area like so, okay? Now see, I'm not adding it all over like that. I'm just kind of blending it in. And there are no, well, I shouldn't say there's very few unexpected, unintentional, undesired marks when you work at this pace. Okay, see this? I'm just adding a little bit in at a time. And then I'm looking at it, okay? Don't just keep going like this and then say, you know, like, you know, some machine or something like that. You know, evaluate as you go along, okay? I'm adding a little bit more tone on the background. Now watch this. I can even get a little bit of shading underneath that area right in there. See how it's all light? Let's add a little bit of tone to it, okay? So, watch this. I can tap this onto this area in here. Imagine you're applying a little bit of makeup or something like that, you know, for Halloween onto a, you know, a baby's face or something like that. They're 2 years old or 1.5 or something like that, and you're applying a little bit of makeup, you know, for them to go out on their first trick-or-treating. That's about the touch you want to do, okay? You don't want to do it hard, in other words. Alright, so we put a little bit of tone on those rocks. So we've added volume and opacity to them. You're seeing that, you know, they're not just like a window, you know, shining through and light's coming right through. But see, that's what makes a big difference right there, or it can, okay? Now on this one right here, that side, those shadows look a little bit darker because I had some black in here. Let's move to that black ink, okay? Now if you have your black ink's really super wet and juicy, you know, as far as the pad goes, then just barely tap that in there. Okay, now mine's kind of medium, so let's take this and add it in. See, I'm just kind of staying in one little area. I'm not going like this, okay? Just work it very gently, and then nothing can happen. Because look, this is what I'm working with right here. This is black, and this is a sponge, right? So just watch this. When I'm tapping it on right here, see, look at that. It's barely visible, okay? And then as you add more, okay, what happens? You apply more and it gets darker, okay? But see, even that, it's like a 30%. It's not that, you know, which is really dark, okay? This is freshly inked and I'm just going like that. It's not that we're working with. We're just working with this. And when you're working that slow, I mean, there is... if you're working that incrementally, okay, it is really hard to do anything that you don't want, okay? And I know some people are saying, oh, well, that's easy for you to say. Well, it's because you're trying to go too fast. But, I mean, this is not a long process. If you do, you know, 15, 20 taps with that, you're done, you know. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That took like 5 seconds, you know, or something like that, right? But that's better than going like that, trying to go faster, and then you get that, and then that takes like 5 minutes to try to kind of blend back in. So it's, you know, just make it a nice gradual process. And this is like really super easy on your hands and things like that. It's all ergonomic and very gentle for your body, and I think that reflects in the end result. It just comes out much more kind of effortlessly, I guess, and graceful. And by doing so, by tapping more, it's not just to slow things down. Oops, I'm getting a little fingerprint action on that. But you get more saturated areas, so you get brighter areas, and I think that looks really good, okay? So just take your time if you apply too much ink in one area, you know, okay, it's like, oh, you know, what's the big deal? I used more black ink there than I needed to. Well, you know, it's not anything, you know, in a negative sense, okay? So that's what you have, okay? That's what we have right here. It looks different though, doesn't it? Different media. Well, this is wet too, but different media, different size. Certainly a similar composition, but they look a little bit different. And I'm the same one that did it. It's not even going from person to person. All right, now I did use that little Kayak, or should we do that one again? I guess we might as well. This is the Kayak stamp. Now this is not in Nature Set 8, but just to keep things similar to that in terms of reference points. Okay. I'm using tack and peel on my acrylic block, which allows this to stick to it in a temporary mounting system. All right, let me make sure that I'm stamping this horizontal. Do a test print like so. Put them right in the spotlight right here. Okay. You have to remember to put your little protective plastic back on that tack and peel. Otherwise you'll lose it like I do and, you know, look all over around for it. All right, everyone has white gel pens, right? I don't know, most of you do. Some I know a lot of you say, oh, I bought those and they didn't work, or I haven't used mine in a while. Try to see what it, see if it's working or not. Let me see. This is my Uniball Signo. I'm not sure if that one's working. I'll have to get it flowing again. This is my Uniball Signo. It's the 1.0 and it has that kind of Japanese writing on it. All right. This is a Uniball Signo too. This one's going, but for expedience sake, let's just use this one. I love the use of highlights, okay? Just like I like shadows, highlights can be rather dynamic in a very minimal way, in terms of the space that they're covering, but they can really stand out, okay? I'd recommend playing around with it if you have one, or trying it out, okay? I have my desk is so cluttered here, but I have this set of, here, let me see if I can show you. The Shuttle art, Shuttle, S-H-U-T-T-L-E. Those 180 colors with 180 refills. Okay, now the price has gone up a little bit, but not too much, relatively speaking. But that set cost me $20 for 180 colors, okay? Not for this one, not for the Uniball Signo. These ones are more expensive, like $1 each, but those pens work fantastic, though, those Shuttle art ones, okay? But see, this is a 1.0, so it's a fairly large ball, but if I just give it a small touch, okay, I can get a really small little mark, okay? So see, those kind of represent stars, and I'm putting them up here. But it adds this dynamic little aspect to it, in that it looks like these are little pinholes of light or something like that. It looks like the light is coming from within the scene now, but look at that extra little texture up there and what that added, okay? It's fun little things you can add, a real constellation up there. If you're giving a birthday card to someone, one of the things I like to do is I like to kind of add their constellation up in the sky. They never know it because I don't kind of point that out like, hey, did you see that? I don't know. I don't even know my own, but I don't do that for everyone. But if you're kind of like to really layer kind of a context, or I should have had a little bit of shadow for that kayaker. I don't know, you can do little things like that. It's kind of fun. All right, these don't represent stars in the water, but they represent specular light. It's that light that's hitting like a water surface or a reflective surface, and it's giving it that kind of shimmer. Okay, see the little shimmer down there. All right, now this is white. All right, Now here's the thing about this concept. There's going to be more highlights in lighter areas, right? Because that's where the light is hitting it, so I'm hitting light. Just like there's going to be deeper shadows in the darker areas, okay? So I can add a few more of these in the light area, white area, I should say. And then as it moves out, there's just less in that darker area, okay? Now if it gets really dark down here, let's go back to that Shuttle art pack. Here's a blue, okay? It's going to be darker than the white, so if you want kind of a little bit more of a subtle highlight down there, then just go with the blue instead of the white, because this is kind of a bluish green scene. You can use like a light green or something like that. You know, you can kind of stay within the color scheme. If you want a brighter star, you can kind of scribble one in there. Here's what I like to do too. I'll show you my gel pen touches, okay? I'll put a few little sparkles in the water that are a little bit larger, maybe. And I don't have to, but I'll show you what I'll do to these little bit of larger dots. In the next step, let's put one big star right there, okay? See how it's a little bit, it's a little bit bigger. Okay. I know a lot of you have pigment ink, okay? Colorbox, Hero Arts, Unicorn, etc., okay? Now I'm going to teach you everything that you want to know about adding mist in this process right here, okay, in this stamp along. Everyone that starts off doing this process right here uses way too much ink, okay? Just like when I'm talking about applying ink on here. There's a lot of ink on here, okay? But I don't apply it like in one really quick slathering, except for that base coat. That base coat you can have a reinker and just really fill that in, okay? But everything else was kind of worked incrementally, slowly, whatever. But I wouldn't say slowly, it's methodical, okay? But that makes it easier, though, to do it that way. And it shortens the time that you'll be spending with something. But going back to this, anytime someone does this, they use way too much ink. 20 times what they should, okay, to make this process. But let me see if I can get here. Okay, here's this dark piece of paper, okay? I'm going to show you how much ink you need on your little cotton swab. I use Q-tips, okay? If you use kind of a cheaper brand, 99-cent store, whatever, that are acrylic ones that are really tightly bound, that's not what you want. You want to go for something kind of softer. Go for the real cotton ones, okay? Or really fray something. I don't know, piece of Kleenex or something, you know what I mean? It's a tissue or something like that. But now this pad of mine is really dry, okay? It's like 20 years old. I mean, you can see it. It's, there's the surface of it. It's indented, actually, from pounding in here with a Q-tip right here. But okay, see here, let me show you what you're going to have, though. Here's my other wetter one, okay? I'm going to put some ink on here, and this is what we're going to get, right? There's these thick balls of paint, okay, like that, right? And that's what people are getting every time. I get it too sometimes because I put too much ink on it, or if I don't have my really dry one. Here, let me just use my wet one, though, so I'll show you what you do with that. Okay, let's say most of your pads are wet, so don't do this to yours. Just barely touch it on there, and you'll get enough ink of what you want, okay? But I'm going to take up too much ink because that's what everyone does when they first start this out. And it's understandable. We're used to getting a sufficient supply of ink, okay, on our things, so we just have muscle memory. We've stamped out thousands and thousands and thousands of impressions, okay, and we want adequate ink on here. But what this is doing is we want the absolute opposite of that. We barely want any ink on here. So I've applied too much ink on here, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. Okay, see that? See how thick that is? We don't want that blob right here. Okay, that's not what you're going to do though. But anyways, here, see what I'm doing is I'm blotting this off. I'm trying to get, think about it in terms of like you're trying to get all the ink off, okay? And I'm kind of using on that side. See, it's still coming off of here, off of that one, inking, okay? But now see, it's getting a little bit, now I'm squeezing some out. If I press harder, then more ink is coming out. But here's what you want, okay? It's getting there now. See, I still have some in some areas because this is an absorbent surface right here. Now I don't want to smash this down so far that it gets to the, that cardboard stick holder. Okay, I want some of that cotton on the front of it. All right, now this is more like it. Okay. Okay, now let me use a lighter touch with it. You can see this, I don't know, what was that, 30 tappings of it or so, 40. Now watch this. Watch me when I barely touch this. Okay, see it right there? Now watch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it's barely showing, right? I mean, I could tap harder, but I don't want to. So see this right here? See, this is kind of building up like that. Okay, now I'm going to use a lighter touch. And there we go. That's what you want right there. Watch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there it is, right? What does that mean? It means complete control over your application of this ink, okay? And that's exactly what you want. It doesn't have to be a hard process. What's hard is that. Trying to apply that amount of ink onto here. You're getting blobs everywhere, okay? Let's say, but here's the process right here. There's nothing more forgiving than this. Let's say I take this, okay, and I blotted it in here really hard, okay? I have that, that thick blobby thing. I have that right there. It's not, if I just left that there and it dried, I could still do this, okay? But watch this. It wipes right off, okay? If you apply too much, just take it right on off, okay? All right, which side of this was dry? Okay, is it that one or is it this one? Okay, it's this one. All right. Oh, what if you have markers like this, alcohol markers? I can't color than this little figure, using, sponge, so I'm just going to do that with this. I know this is a little brown. No, let's give their kayak a little bit of color. Let's say their kayak's, I don't know, I put some brown on that, but I'll add a little bit of green to that or something. I don't know, maybe I should have given them a red jacket or something like that. Okay, so anyways, colored them in, good to go. Yeah, if you don't have alcohol markers, then use a very light colored one, okay? Don't use a dark one. Otherwise it might look too harsh. So start light and work darker. That's, like I said, if you add something in, it's not really a big deal because it's so light. Okay, let's add this atmospheric mist to our scene. All right, see that right in there, down there. What you do is you don't cover up everything, okay? The first thing that people do quite often is they use too much ink, or when they start using this, they cover too much space, okay? So let's see if I can zoom in here. All right, I think that should do it. And let's put a little bit of tone. Okay, now where are you going to apply this? Well, you have to kind of do it. I like to do it where kind of dark meets light. So watch this trait right here, okay? And I like to do it not over my whole object, but look at that lighting on there. So we have a varied impression now. Well, it's not really a varied impression, it's a varied, well, I guess it's an impression. It's a varied object. Okay, so I'm putting some. See that side of the tree facing the light right there? Now look at these trees down here. Those look fine, but watch this right here. I'll put a little bit of tone in between some of them, like they're being backlit or something. But see, I'm not doing it over all of them. I'm just barely touching this now, okay? But see that right there? See that atmosphere in there? It would look funny if I did it over everything, okay? So I just do it here and there. Now watch this branch right here. It's backlit, right? So let's take this and let's add a little bit here and there to it. So you're softening some of these things right here. And that might not seem like a big deal, but you are adding a completely different texture into the scene right now. We have crisp impressions everywhere. And so this is one of the few areas in rubber stamping where kind of there are certain images that have represent different textures, but when we stamp them out, they're crisp impressions, okay? But watch this right here. See this little area here where it's next to the light? If I kind of put some of this around that, it looks soft. So it's one of the few kind of places in rubber stamping where we're playing around with visual texture and adding an element of softness into it. And at the same time, you're adding an element of light. Okay, now see that little mist down at the base of that rock? But I'm not doing the whole rock, okay? Now watch that little row back there, okay? We'll have some areas crisp, and we'll have some areas soft, okay? See that right there? Now if you added too much, let's say, let me add too much here, okay? Like I said, you can kind of dab it off here. I'm just dabbing it off with my finger, and it comes right off, right? I'm not using Brilliance ink either. That dries instantly. But see that right there? Now I've knocked it down to the right translucency, okay? The right layering of it. Okay, now watch over here. Adding this down. Now I'm purposely tapping too hard, but now that looks really funny, right? But let's just dab a little off like this, okay? And it comes out a little bit more. And that looks pretty good, right? So you just use your finger to remove however much you want, but let's use a little bit of a different application process. Let's go a little bit slower. It's a little bit too much. I'll just dab it off like this. Your finger is kind of like a little eraser. There's nothing easier than that and more forgiving, and that's everything that I do when I ever stamp scenes. Everyone, when they look at the end result, it looks rather, you know, kind of I don't know, rich and I don't know what the word would be. It looks a little more complicated in the end result because of all this layering, but every part of the process, to me, in the way that I do it, it's all about kind of this gradual process and very forgiving one. There's no kind of unexpected thing. If I drop a stamp, yeah, you know, or something like that. But the way that you take things in just so incrementally, it's like it's like you have this knob going from 1 to 100, okay? And I'm going from 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not jumping from 1 to 25 or something like that. That makes it a little bit more precarious. You can do that, but, you know, it's a little bit more, it's like brush calligraphy or something like that, where it's, you know, you have to have a very sured hand and very spontaneous, or like watercolor painters, you know, once you get it down, it's down. This is much different than that. In terms of a process, it could have the end result that looks like that, like it's been painted or something like that, but you can see it's all, now see, I've kind of just added a little bit down there at a time, and I haven't re-inked this yet, you know, I just keep adding a little bit at a time. Now this ink, I'm not going to add it in my darker areas, because if I'm adding white pigment ink, it represents light hitting some mist or something in the air and illuminating it, so I'm not going to do too much of that. in my darker areas, or any at all, okay? If you want some areas a little bit lighter, then just kind of keep building it up, okay? So, do you see that change that's kind of starting to happen? So take things slow, and you'll have complete control over it. Try to do it a little bit faster. It's more like kind of like expressionism or something like that, you know, which I you know, respect. I like that look, and there are some people that work faster, and they have a very assured hand. I'm a little bit more methodical, and I don't know, slow about my process, but I mean, this card didn't take a long time to come together, and of course I'm blabbing on. I could have done this in about, I'd say about a 15-minute card or something like that. But watch this now. See all that mist and everything. Watch that star, a couple of these stars, okay? Barely touching it, okay? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Now watch that star. Look how it's kind of glowing now. Let's do it over here where you can see it a little bit easier in the darker areas, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So about 25 tabs or so, but look at that. It's a little bit blobby. So I'm going to take my finger and just kind of mellow it out a little bit. So we have that. See how that little star glows? I wouldn't do that on all of them. I think it looks good when certain ones kind of stand out. Maybe I'll put 2 glowing ones right next to each other. Yes, that's a little bit more random. Oops. My tip's getting a little bit, now it's the word wonky on me. It's gonna get frayed, so it's leaving a little bit. But look at those little glowing stars right there. And that looks like light coming from within your card out. And that's the magic of it, okay? That is what adds kind of a nice little touch. We have this little area down here in the water. Let's add, here I can kind of cover up my little fingerprint. Oops, look at that. I went like that over here, and I had this, and I got ink right there, but it comes right off. When other times can you do that in stamping and, you know, erase ink? You know, so that's why this process is so easy. I can't erase that. Oh, I don't like that kayak, or I got to remove it, you know, or something like that. You can't really do that. I guess if I really didn't like some kind of object on there, I would take that oak branch and I would just stamp, you know, right over the top of them or something like that. It would look kind of weird, but you can cover things up like that a little bit to some extent. Okay, now see, I'm adding some of this little kind of glowing light I just ringed to get a little bit brighter or lighter. And I'm adding some of this in the water, so it looks like little shimmering, twinkly bits of light on my surface. Alright, so there is a quarter-size card. Now, like I said, I was talking through that whole thing. I don't know how long that card took, but it could have taken a lot less time without the explanation portion. But the big thing is that, you know, what I'm talking about in terms of concept is just to take things in nice and incrementally. Okay, now here's the thing too. If I get to some stage and I thought, oh, you know, and I wish I could have used a little bit more of that blue ink. You know, just take that blue ink. Now I have that pigment ink down here, and if I tone over it, it's going to get rid of all that pigment ink. But you can just redo something, or you can add in something again and just go back and add more of the white gel pen and pigment ink over the top of that, but you can add ink right over the top of that too. I could have stamped out that entire composition first and then toned all over it, you know, after that too, but I would have had to wait for this ink to dry before I can kind of start blending in those inks. So it's not like you have to do the background first and then tone in. I could stamp out that entire composition, oak tree, Lakeside Cove Lg, pines and rocks first, and, you know, in the kayaker, and then toned it in, you know. But like I said, you just have to kind of wait for it to dry. But variation on a composition, not really so much of a theme, it's a direct composition and color scheme. They look quite different from one another because of the medium, and also because this one's wet right now too. It might be a good idea to spray it before it dries, but anyways, there's your same imagery for the most part. I didn't use the Lakeside Reflections Large. I could have used that stamp for that stamp too, but for the most part, we're talking about the same imagery, the same color scheme, the same techniques. Quarter size, full page, okay? It looks a little bit differently, but they all work like that, so that's the way everything's kind of been designed, it's conceptualized, and that's the same thing that we can do in application, okay? It looks like a smaller version of that because it is, but, you know, I don't know. That same Lakeside Cove doesn't look out of place in this, you know, as, what am I trying to say, as it is in this one right here, so there it is right there. You can almost layer this in. Look at this. You can look at this. If I didn't have that Kayak down here, you can do something like this where you do a full page thing in the background, then have that thing on like a three-dimensional foam core or something like that. And this could go right in there, but you can see where it just kind of blends in with that, you know. See how that blends in right there? So you can see how the imagery blends together. You know, I'm talking about that Lakeside Cove with this one right here. I mean, you could do, one time I saw like a 4 feet wide version of this one, and it was this image used across a 4-foot panel. It was at the stamp store. This guy stamped it out in Lake Elsinore, called The Little Bazaar, but he had a huge version of this. Not color scheme, but the imagery. So anyways, I hope you had a good time if you did that stamp along aspect of this. Just remember to just take everything nice and slow in terms of your blending process, but like I said, in the end result, when you do this, it won't take a long time to do because you're much more careful in applying it, which means, you know, it doesn't mean that it's precarious either, you know, like you have to be careful in terms of your application. Just kind of keep things in one area and work your zones as opposed to trying to work the whole thing together. And that way you get some nice saturations and a nice colored glow. We don't have like super dark colors in our lighter areas, okay? And everything comes together beautifully that way. So kind of work that same kind of concept. Just use very little and then keep adding a little bit more for inks, gel pens and whatnot, and certainly for the pigment ink aspect of it. One thing, like with the gel pen too, let's say I didn't like something, I added too many stars, it's looking crazy, so you just take this and, see that? I can get that star right off of there. I don't know if you remember there was one right there. Here, let me take that one off, just for making a point here, okay? Gone. What is more forgiving than that? Not too much. Now, I can't say, I don't like that green, wipe it off. That's not coming off or something like that. But those little added effects are certainly, you know, very, very forgiving, you know, in terms of your approach to them. If you add too many or play around with it, go too far with it, you know, and then erase them, okay? And it'll come right off. But I always tell people in my workshops, I think it's always better to go a little bit more, you know, go overboard with something, you know, because then you'll know kind of that maximum amount that you should always apply. That's always better than always kind of holding off and never achieving kind of the maximum, I don't know, resolution or whatever, the maximum, you know, the furthest version that you can push something, okay, in all of your pieces. So these are just scenes. As my painting teacher, beginning painting teacher in college used to say, it's not precious. Because we were always kind of like, hey, should I do this? I don't know if I should, you know, we're kind of scared or something like that. She would just say, hey, you know, and it was oil painting too, so you can just paint right over it too, so I don't know. I get your point now. Talking to my teacher in the past. All right, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, drop us a note down in the comment section or send us an email.